I think it's time to kick off, and I'll keep admitting folks as they join. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on your Thursday for today's session, Enhancing Your Professional Toolbox, presented by Mike Tiliakos with Argo Group. This is session 4 of our Spencer webinar series, so welcome back if you've come to our past 3 of this summer's series, 2022. My name is Rachel Lieblein-Gervala. I'm the program manager at Spencer, and just to give a brief introduction to who we are, if you don't know, we are a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting students who wish to pursue careers in risk management and insurance. And we do that through scholarships and through internship grants, as well as to grants to universities and organizations for experiential learning opportunities for students, as well as program and RMI curriculum development at universities. I have a couple of housekeeping notes before we kick off to the main event today. The first is that the session is being recorded, just so you know, so it will be available on Spencer's website after the fact if you want to revisit any information you hear here today, or if you have any friends or colleagues in your network that weren't able to join and would like to access it, please direct them there. Again, if you're just joining, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to get to know who's with us today. I do encourage you, if you're comfortable, I see a number of faces, thank you so much, to turn your video on if you would like to do so we can just feel a sense of community for this hour that we're together. And finally, we strongly encourage you to ask questions and engage throughout Mike's presentation. You'll be able to do that in 2 different ways this time around. So first is please feel free to use the chat. You'll also be provided a link to Slido, which is a way that you can anonymously ask questions. So you can use either function, and Brianna, who's on this call, will be monitoring both and making sure that your questions are answered by Mike. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce you all to Mike Tiliakos. Mike joined Argo Group in April 2020. And is currently the Assistant General Counsel for Employment and Corporate Litigation. As Assistant General Counsel, Michael provides advice and counsel to Argo on a wide array of employment topics, as well as manages outside counsel and provides strategic advice on corporate litigations. Prior to joining Argo, Michael worked as an attorney in the public and private sectors, including serving as a partner in a large international law firm and founding a bi-coastal management side boutique labor and employment law firm. In his free time, Michael is very passionate about giving back, which he is demonstrating to us all right now. He is actively involved in a number of nonprofit organizations, including serving as chair of A Call to Men, which is a violence prevention organization. And with that, Mike, thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to hand the floor over to you.
Sure, thank you. Thank you. Hey, everyone. It's so nice to meet you, even if it's virtually. It certainly works. It's my pleasure to always be in front of a group of people, especially people, that are kind of starting out in the next either path of their life or their career. Because I'm a true believer, everyone matters, and it's important to kind of learn from each other. I always learn from the more people I meet. There's either a different perspective or there's a different experience, and it's just wonderful for me as well. Rachel was right. I mean, you could feel free to throw in questions in either the chat or the Slido, or just raise your hand, however you want to do it, because the more interactive it is, the better anyway. You don't want to hear me for whatever it is, half an hour. Rachel shared with you a little bit of my bio, and it is one thing I mentioned to you. I've worn a lot of hats, not always by design, right? I've a lot of times, I've been forced to wear a different hat because maybe something I was going after didn't work out, right? I finished law school and I wanted a particular job and I didn't get it. And I kind of started in a totally different part of public service. I worked for the city of New York, the Corporation Counsel's Office and the law department, which wasn't necessarily my first choice. I wound up enjoying it very much and got great experience for it. But I think that's one of the messages that I always, kind of like to say, to remind myself about and tell others that, sometimes the road less traveled, there's a value to it. Or sometimes the path that you think you're going to want to take and it doesn't work out, and that's disheartening. But you don't give up. You keep your feet moving. You keep kind of plugging away, and that's when things like what we're going to talk about today, building relationships, building your network, building your character, all those things, they come in handy because they become a currency for you to lean on and use and learn something. So, no one has, or I think, really a kind of a charmed professional life, right? There's always things that there's bumps in the road, there's setbacks, there's things that just test us as people in our professional path. And, you should be open to kind of learning something different and perhaps pivoting a little bit, if that's where life takes you. And like I said, sometimes it certainly will. A lot of what we're going to talk about today, by the way, is I put it under the common sense umbrella. I don't know that there's anything that I'm going to be sharing with you all today that you're saying like, wow, that is magical. Like I've never thought of that before. I've never heard of that before. So much about building in these toolboxes that we talk about, these intangibles, is more of an art than it is a science, right? And maybe kind of just reminding yourself of it, reminding yourself of the importance of it, and staying disciplined and dedicated to it. Because oftentimes it's very easy to just focus on the technical aspects of our job and our profession, which are of course important, but sometimes neglecting then the other intangible parts, like how we network, how we keeping in touch with people. Are we doing the right things? What does our character look like? Our attitude at work, our commitment to collaboration, things like that are just as important in the professional setting and of course outside of it. So today is just going to be kind of like a little bit of a reminder session, a lot about common sense things that you probably all know, but maybe not always common practice. And that's kind of the one of the benefits of having these talks with each other and sharing ideas, is that it puts it back into the common practice setting. So we'll talk about today building. I'll start with, let me see, move this up. Right, that's me a little too up close. There's our Slido number, by the way. If you need to add throw in a comment in there, we're monitoring that. So you see here building. These are the three types of toolboxes that we're going to want to talk about today. Building and protecting your reputation, critically important, right? Your character, focusing on attitude, some of those intangible things that we talked about really does matter. And of course, building relationships with people inside and outside your company. So taking it a little bit out of order than what I just shown it, building relationships is our first one that I want to talk about. And always hand in hand with this goes networking, right? And that is because networking, or call it whatever you want, relationship building. Sometimes networking has such a kind of almost like a stuffy name to it, and it can be intimidating. All it is just building and fostering relationships with people, right? Professionally, of course, is the professional networking. You all have done this in every other aspect of your life. You would not have gotten to where you are now if you hadn't networked in some way, shape, or form. And maybe it hasn't been so much professional, but you've built relationships personally. You made friends, you've adjusted, friendships have grown and expanded, you've met other people, maybe through those people as well, and you've cultivated those relationships. The professional aspect isn't really that much different. And really all you have to do, and you have to really value it and respect it, because really what it is the more people you build your professional network around, more people you meet, you never know where they can introduce you, what doors they can open for you. I got my current job, by the way, at Argo. I was at another company. I got my current job from a friend of mine that I worked with at the city, our first job together out of law school. He's a couple of years younger than me, more junior to me. But we became friends there and we maintained our friendship, and he represented Argo in some legal work. And when he heard about the opening, he shared it with me. Now, had I not maintained this relationship with somebody that I met, 20 something years ago at the city, who was even more junior than I was, it's unlikely I would have had this opportunity to work at a place that I very much enjoy with great people. So that is one of the key takeaways that I want to have stress upon all of you, is that it's not just enough. Sometimes people view it as quantity over quality. They say, I have X number of connections on LinkedIn. And by the way, if you're not on something like LinkedIn, I would suggest it, right? It's a good vehicle to kind of get your name and brand out there and build it. But sometimes I feel like people feel it's a numbers game. Well, I have 100 connections. I have 500 connections. And those are wonderful. But the reality is, like friends, there's a difference between true friends and acquaintances. And so some of your professional network are going to be more in the acquaintances bucket. But the more that could be true, like friends, where it's a little more deep, a little more meaningful, those are going to be the ones that are going to more likely lead to opportunities for you. And you can say, well, how do I build that? The one thing you have to do is just maintain it, just like you would with any relationship. It's awkward if you reach out to somebody, you meet somebody at a function, you meet me today, right? And then you're silent with me until 7 months from now, or out of the blue, you email me back and you say, Mike, I hear Argo is looking to hire somebody or whatever, or I see on LinkedIn that somebody at XYZ company. Would you mind making an introduction? I've applied there. Like that's not an unfair ask necessarily on somebody's part, but it makes it much more difficult for me to kind of exchange my currency into this other company or other person when I don't really know you. I know we met, but I really don't know you. So the more you can kind of build and cultivate that relationship, and we'll talk about that in a second, the better. The better for you and the better for that person. It makes it easier for that other person to kind of sell you or promote you because now they know something more about you. So I think the repetition and the discipline of keeping in touch with people that you meet is really important. I think that if you're just going to do it, like I said, once every 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, a year, or even more, it's less likely to be effective. Of course, on the other side of the spectrum, you have to strike that balance where you don't want to be peppering the person with emails once a week or LinkedIn messages or other forms of communication once a week. It may make it a little repetitive then. So trying to find that balance of like a regular cadence, and maybe it's something just, the beginning of a season, wishing somebody, hey, I hope you enjoy the summer. I hope you have some good plans, just checking in on you, be well. Maybe it's something that you see in the news that is in that person's industry, right? You see something, hey, I saw this news article in XYZ publication and it made me think of you and I wanted to share. I hope you're doing well, or maybe it's, something that you're involved with completely socially. Hey, I know, Mike, you're involved with the Court of Men, and I saw this particular article or this event that's taking place, and it made me think of you, and I wanted to reach out. Good luck with it, or thought you'd be of interest. Now, all of a sudden, again, like any other relationship in your life, you're really kind of cultivating it, you're building it. That other person is getting to know you, you're getting to know that person. So I think, that's something that's really important to keep in mind. Look, it's a little more difficult. I'd be interested in people's thoughts today. 5 years ago, if we were doing this, maybe we would have done it by video, but there would also probably be a function of it that would be live in person. I started at Argo remotely. I started during the pandemic, April 2020. So there's a lot of my colleagues and friends at work that I still haven't met in person. Slowly that's changing, right? But I've built relationships with them anyway through this medium, and it's worked. And Argo has certainly, as a company, embraced flexibility, which I think is great, right? People are working remotely, and knock on wood, it seems to be working from certainly a productivity standpoint, but also in terms of building connections with each other. So the flexibility there works. Part of flexibility, though, I think is, of course, you have to be flexible to occasionally meet in person. That's part of the flexibility. Some places may want you to be, in a physical location more regularly than others. So I think that's something you want to be open to. But I think even if you are remote, it may require an extra level of discipline and structure on your part so that you're intentional about building those relationships, including internal relationships, right? So oftentimes, we all think of when we're thinking about this networking and building our relationships, we're thinking about people outside of our house. Maybe we're thinking, oh, I want to meet somebody who works for a different type of company who can help me in one way, shape, or form. But oftentimes, it's also, you can't forget about those internal connections that you have to make. And when you're working remotely, or even in a hybrid basis, you have to be a little more intentional about that. So maybe it's looking through the organizational chart and seeing other business units, either or within your own business unit, people that you want to meet, and setting up some time, putting some time on the calendar, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever you think is appropriate, and whatever that person has to spare, so you can just get to know each other, meeting. Those are really important, and I think people are open to that, especially now, because we've all become more accustomed to that, and we've become more accustomed to the fact that we're working remotely. Somebody's not going to just walk down the hallway to you, knock on your door, and come in and meet. You may still have those opportunities. I am curious, like I said, how everybody is finding this world and how you're adjusting to it, if there is any adjustment, whether you like it or not, because I do think it impacts how you go about your plan to kind of meet people. And, at Argo, we try to be very innovative. So we have like these Shark Tank things, and people talk about what works, what doesn't work, and it is an open door of sharing ideas and concepts. So part of me is also looking to to get some good feedback and suggestions from all of you on what we can learn from people and others in terms of what works for you, why, what do you like about it, what do you not like about it. I think that's an important part too. But anyway, it'll help you build your relationships as well with people. So one of the ways that I have always found is a good way. Like I said, I talked about LinkedIn because I think professionally it makes sense. It's a common denominator. You can reach out to people easily on there, as opposed to emails change. People could move and then you lose track of where they are. But on something like LinkedIn, you can have that constant kind of communication. And you can follow along you can see when you last connected with them. I think that, finding platforms, a reason to reach out to somebody other than just when you need something. I think that's important. And you could do that sometimes by seeing what the other individual is liking on LinkedIn, what they're following. And so maybe now you have a commonality. Oh, look at that. They're following, this particular company or this particular cause, right? And then that gives you a common denominator, a common basis to kind of reach out and further develop your conversation and your relationship with them. And you can do that as well internally. I mentioned at Argo, flexibility and things. One of the other things we do is we try to be very engaged, not only with each other, but our communities. So all the offices have community relations committees, and people can do that virtually as well. We have charitable either donations or activities that we're doing. And that's a good way for people to kind of meet each other. And if wherever you are at is doing something like that, you should take advantage of it, because you're going to meet somebody through those efforts, through that cause, through trying to do good. And that's going to be yet another pillar for you to build your relationship and your foundation on. I want to pause right there and see if there's anything that anybody has or any comment on that, or if you want to give me some of your feedback on the hybrid world, I will gladly take it and learn from all of you. I'll pause for a few seconds. Nothing. Okay. Don't be shy, by the way. Don't worry about it. There's no question that's not a good question. There's no point that's not a good point. This is I try to make this the trust tree. You can feel comfortable talking about it, and believe me, I'm the last person to judge anybody. So feel free to pass any questions or any comments along. One thing I will say too, so a couple other things I do, especially when I meet somebody new, I try to keep some kind of internal notes. I used to do it in the back of a business card, but now with technology, you could do it on your contact sheet or wherever you have where you're storing this person's information. Right? There'll be a notes section on them. Or there's certainly apps that have virtual business cards that you could share. Write down when and where you met the person. Write down what other information you gathered, in your conversation with them. Maybe they shared with you where they live. Maybe they shared with you their favorite sports team. Maybe they shared with you a cause that they're working on. Maybe whatever it is that they shared, put that down there, because you're going to forget. I mean, it's just natural. You're going to forget it. You're going to remember it in that moment. You remember it the next day, but you're probably going to forget it, like most human beings, in 2-3 weeks, a month from now. Having that kind of intel on people is helpful because it allows you to pick up the conversation where it left off. Right. So keeping track of that is important. I think similarly, when you're working with people now, wherever you may be interning or just working, it's good to almost keep a log of the projects you're working on and the people that you worked on them with, because it helps for later interviews. Should you interview outside your current company, if they ask you questions about any interesting assignments you had or challenge in projects that you worked on, whatever the case may be, you can remember some specifics, but you can also talk about people that you worked with. Depending on the industry, it can be really useful because it's a small world and an even smaller industry. Certainly be yourself. I mean, I think all of us, when we're looking at people, we gravitate towards authenticity. And when it comes certainly to network, I remember one time, I don't know how many years ago it was now at this point. It was obviously a little early in my career. I was going to a function with a couple of colleagues, one of whom was a partner in this particular law firm, right? So I'm an attorney. That was that structure of the work. And his advice was, you should come back to me with at least 10 business cards. And I remember thinking that was so foolish because, and I didn't do it, by the way, because it was my chance to network the way I saw fit. It wasn't in my character. Sometimes everyone's different on how you want to go about building relationships. There's not one way to do it. It's just about what's natural for you, what is authentic to you. If you're somebody who is a little more comfortable having, communications by email because or other written communications as opposed to face to face, then you should do that. If you feel more comfortable talking about, just maybe 1 or 2 people at an event that you're at, do that. Don't try to be somebody you're not. Don't try to fill a role that's like a part in a movie of what you think somebody who is a successful networker is like, because you're just not going to be comfortable doing it, and it's going to dissuade you from doing it. And that's one of the biggest obstacles, I think, for all of us when we're meeting new people, is it's uncomfortable. It can be awkward just to go up to someone, but you get over that. Trust me, with practice, you get over that. It doesn't matter as much because I guarantee you, everybody who's at an event, whether it's virtual or in person, is there to meet people. No one's going to kick you out of a particular group because you try to come into their circle and get to know them. That's why everybody's there. Everybody is there really to meet people or to talk about something. So be yourself. Don't try to stretch yourself. Sometimes you want to try to expand your comfort zone a little, but don't be somebody you're not, because then that's the impression that the person's going to be left with. So, like I said, key thing here, I think, is the repetition. Some of the biggest mistakes that I've seen others make, either when they're networking with me or outside, is they reach out once and then that's it. And that just makes it hard. No relationship has ever been built that way, right? No relationship has ever happened, even in your personal lives. No relationship has ever been a truly successful one with just I'm going to walk up to the plate and try to hit a walk-off home run in the Game 7 of the World Series. It just doesn't work that way, right? It comes with some natural, just getting to know each other. Stay connected with people. Doesn't have to be the longest. You don't have to send them a dissertation on why you want to be in this field. A simple message every so often of, I'm just checking in with you. I hope you're doing well. That just keeps the conversation going. Don't be discouraged if they don't get back to you immediately. People get busy, falls off their screen. Keep at it. A little bit of polite and respectful persistence in that regard, I think, is okay. So before I move on to the next thing, let's see a chat here. I thought that's a Slido. Feel free to jump in. Any questions, any thoughts? Anybody having, any experiences they want to share with either networking or otherwise? No? Okay, it's fair enough. By the way, if you communicate with email, right, and I've seen that happen too, right? It's not, before you get onto the LinkedIn, maybe you get the person's business card and you're communicating with him or her by email. What I would suggest too when you do that is in any subsequent conversations that you have, use that same email chain, because it refreshes the other person's memory on where you met, on who you are, until you have enough kind of familiarity with each other that the person's going to know, like, oh, that's Mike. I remember Mike, right? Until that comes, it's best that if you're going to respond to and communicate by email, you respond to the last email chain that you have going with the person. All right. So building relationships, again, nothing that's terribly scientific about it. It does take discipline. It's a little uncomfortable. Stay with it. It really matters. So much in life is about our relationships with other people. Okay. And we'll talk about it, a little later on when we talk about character and attitude. That helps fuel building relationships, right? Because we all want to be with people who care about us as people, who care about the causes that we're working in our lives, care about the company. It matters. Those are meaningful relationships, and that's what we're looking to do, is build meaningful relationships. We put in here building your reputation too as another point and another tool for you all to have in your toolbox, because it is related. These are all kind of related concepts. It really is critically important. And the older I got, and hopefully continue to get in life, and the more I work, the more I realize that your reputation really is critically important. Your credibility as a coworker, as a friend, as a business person, as somebody who's out there trying to get business, whatever you're doing in life, your reputation is really important. None of us make decisions in our lives, whether they're personal or professional, in a vacuum. We base it on the other person's credibility, how we like them, do we trust them, do they have a good reputation, what has been our experience with them. These are all things that matter, and you start building your reputation now. right? And every day you work on it, and you never want to get complacent with it, right? So you have to be open to learning new things, right? It's not, none of us are a finished product. None of us. I don't care how long you've been doing what you're doing. We are all a work in progress. We're all continuing to learn every day. Every person you meet is going to teach you something different. Either they're going to validate perhaps a position that you had or a thought that you had, or they're going to challenge it respectfully, but there's going to be a challenge that's going to bring you a different perspective. Be open to it. That's okay. That builds your reputation as somebody who's kind of reasonable and is willing to, consider different viewpoints and perspectives and grow as a professional, as a person, and collaborate with others, work together, right? Those are all things that matter. I had a great, be open, by the way, to learning new things, right? That's always important, kind of along those lines. I remember, it had to be my 8th grade communications teacher in middle school. And he had this great line I've never forgotten. And it was always that there is no substitute for preparation. That's what he would always say. Charles Lloyd Conway is his name. I don't remember all my teachers, I remember him. And it was a great line because he was so right. And I often found that, that is a good way of how you build your reputation. There's no substitute for preparation. When you're prepared for whatever it is that you're going to do, whether it's you're turning in an assignment, you're making a presentation to someone, or you're going to an event and you want to be prepared to talk about, either yourself or a cause that you're working on, or the company, or your stage in your career and what you're looking for, whatever it may be, there really is no substitute for being prepared. It's a critical part, and it helps build your reputation, right? Because then people think about you as somebody who's going to come into a meeting or is going to work on a project, and they're going to be prepared. It demonstrates seriousness, right? And it really is truly important. Caring about your work and taking pride in your work. And we're kind of talking a little bit now of the technical things, but it's kind of the attitude stuff, those intangibles that really matter. It's, not just doing A+ work or as close to A+ work in what you can do, because people notice that. So you always want to do your best, but showing that you care about it and you can go the extra mile, or you want to go the extra mile when need be, right? And when appropriate. That you're proactively asking for more work, building that reputation. Again, you're somebody who cares. You're not just saying, okay, give me this assignment, I'll do it and give it back to you, and I'll wait for the next one. But you're looking for ways to kind of integrate yourself into the business, into the company, into your coworkers. That builds, people notice that. I can't tell you how many times I've sat in on interview meetings, or hiring, I should say, committee meetings, not necessarily here at Argo, right? But in my prior lives, and how important it was, those intangibles. How much does, if the person, summered with us, did an internship with us, how much did the person care about their work that they did, about their colleagues? Do they have that right reputation? Do they have that right attitude, which we'll talk about in a minute? So be proactive about it. Don't be afraid to kind of stretch yourself a little bit, broaden your perspective, get out there, not only meeting colleagues, so you're building your base and your networking, but you're also getting your name and your reputation out there. And part of that is just by being involved, right? There's always going to be, wherever you all are at, I saw a bunch of places, companies where you all were working at, great places. I'm sure there's people there that the more you get to know them, the more they're going to involve you. The more activities the company is doing, the better. The more not only people you're going to meet, but the more you're going to become woven into the fabric of the company, right? So I see, looking at all this risk management. All right, University of Wisconsin-Madison. All right. I'm a Penn Stater, so I will not hold that against my friends at Wisconsin-Madison. I love the school, great school. Although they rejected me, I will tell you this, I still remember that. Talk about that, there's always setbacks. You never always get what you want all the time. But all of those places, all of your places that you're working now and you're interning now, they're all going to have things that to keep people involved and to make it more than just come in, make widgets and go home. So the more you're involved with that, the more it helps build your reputation as somebody who cares about the company, cares about the brand, cares about each other. So be involved, ask questions. Of course, there's no shame in that. There's no shame in not understanding either an assignment or understanding what's being asked of you. Better to clear that up on the front end. And the last thing I'll say about this one is, and this one is often tough, right? And it's easier said than done, but hold yourself accountable, right? Hold yourself accountable. It goes hand in hand with having some pride with what, your work product and the work you're doing. Nobody's perfect. If you haven't made mistakes until this point in your life and your career, I'd say one, you're probably lying to yourself, but also two, you've just been that extremely rare person. We all learn by mistakes, and the thing that I think that most people can tolerate is when people are accountable and they hold themselves accountable, because it shows a level of maturity and it really builds your reputation. I think people know that you're not going to be perfect. No one is. No, people make mistakes all the time. We all do. It's just owning them and grow. And then when you're accountable to them, again, not only does that show a level of professionalism and that you care, but it also allows you to grow as a professional, because that's when you're truly open and honest with yourself about what you did and what you could do better. It then becomes a learning experience for you. Don't shy away from it. Don't be so defensive where you're not open to constructive criticism. Okay. So I'll take a pause there again. Anything? No comments, anything? I'm not actually monitoring Slido, so I'm sorry if it's fine. It's not easy to get stuck doing more without recognition. So that's a great question. Brianna, thank you for asking that. I get asked that from time to time, like, how do you advocate for yourself? Right. And that is what I find tough about that is, I think you're relying a little bit on trust, that if I work really hard, if I report to Brianna, and my job is to kind of help make Brianna's life a little easier, to make her more effective, I am trusting that Brianna is going to reciprocate that and look out for me. And that's, so I think that's at least, and I don't know, again, I don't know everything. I'm a work in progress myself. I've always taken the stance that if I report to Brianna, my job is to lift up Brianna as much as possible, make her look good, and then she will in turn reciprocates and take care of me. I've always been really careful to not try to have sharp elbows and bump in front of her and kind of, be the one that people take, that's recognized, like, oh, that was Mike, let's give Mike a pat on the back. And the reason is because I think there's a little bit of, it's unbecoming in many respects, I think, right? Other people could view it as like, thanks a lot, Mike, you're showing sharp elbows. And I think it could really backfire with the person you're reporting to. Now, I'm not saying I'm right on that. That's just been my kind of view on it, rightly or wrongly. I'm open to kind of disagreements on that. I think you advocate, for yourself by being involved in as many different things, so people know your voice. And when they see an idea that sounds like it could have also come from you because they've seen your work and your product in other areas, they know the fingerprints of that. And I think if you feel you're not getting that advocacy, that it's also probably worth a polite discussion, perhaps, with the manager on how, if you could present, for example, on something that you worked on. And candidly, I think good managers will also try to lift up the people who report to them. That if somebody worked on something, they have that opportunity to kind of present it. Now, it's always a fine line, right? Because it depends on who you're presenting to, what the stakes are. No manager, like if you're interested in sports and you watch sports, like no coach wants to set up their player for failure. You want to put them in a position where they're going to be successful. And it's the same thing too in the business world, right? If you have people reporting to you, you want to make sure that you're setting them up for success. You don't necessarily want their first time that they're doing a presentation to be before the chief executive officer, who may have not as much time on his or her hands and is busy, and you want to kind of try and give some practice pieces to the person. So I think, that's my 2 cents. I don't know if anybody on the line has their own thoughts on that, because I think there's many ways to think about it. I just, myself, like I said, I'm not a believer in trying to cut the line and go in front of your manager and be like, this was all me, this was my idea, because I think that doesn't show collaboration. And I think it may very well may fall poorly on your manager and on others. So anybody have any thoughts on that? It's a great question. And like a lot of these things, by the way, I don't know that there's a right answer and a wrong answer, right? Because everything we're talking about is human behavior. It's going to depend on circumstances, it's going to depend on what's going on. I think it's fine to kind of advocate for yourself, just not stepping on somebody else while you're doing it. All right. No other points? I'm trying to look here. Okay. The last one that we had in here is building character. Again, all of these are kind of connected, right? There's a thread that goes between all of them. It's all about building, and it's all about these intangible qualities. The more you build your character, the more you're going to build your reputation, the more likely you are to build relationships. People will know about you, right? I always say here, but what this is really about too is just being a good locker room player. I love sports, so I use sports analogies a lot, right? Being a good locker room player, being somebody who plays nice in a sandbox, who other people know is a team player, somebody who's going to try to help, and put the business or the company or the team first before themselves. I think that matters. It's and I think increasingly, and I read this is not just me thinking this, I read this in a lot of magazines or publications. Increasingly, companies are interested in attitude, those intangibles, because most places can teach you the X's and O's of your job. If your job involves, whatever, you're an actuarial, they can teach you how to do these numbers, they can how to analyze issues. If you're doing risk management, they could give you extra classes where you're learning the nuts and bolts of that particular business, of that particular line of work. But it's harder for managers or for a company to kind of completely change those intangibles in you, like making sure that you're a team player. And if you look at any core value, if you go on any company, your own company that you're at now, and you look at their values, right, you're going to see in almost all of them some form of teamwork. At Argo, it's collaboration, right? That's one of our core values. You're going to see it at all sorts of other places. It may not be the exact same words, but the spirit of it is going to be the same. Be nice together. We all come into this community, into this workplace community, right? Trying to bring in different ideas, different perspectives, all those things, but we got to make it work. And so the more of a team player you are, the more you're willing to kind of help out your colleague, the more you're looking, you take pride in those things, the more that's something that now your manager doesn't have to spend time teaching you. You've already learned it, you're exhibiting it. You make his or her life easier. You become more of an asset. And I think those are all things that help you. You don't want to be a bad distraction. It goes without saying too, and I've said this before to people, when you talk about your character and your integrity, it really is the things that you've learned in kindergarten. Say thank you, please, like be respectful, and please be respectful to everyone. And I can't believe that a lot of times I have to say it, but it really does matter. Everyone. There's not, again, I know we're in a virtual world, but sometimes, I've seen it in environments, not at Argo thinking, but in other environments where people will treat somebody at a certain level differently than they will at somebody at a quote unquote lower level. That's not right. Right? That's not right. Nobody wants to be treated like that. That's not a sign of respect. The more respectful you are to everyone, it really matters. And then you show some humility as well. Does anybody have a point on that or a question? Okay. Keep in mind too, you're an ambassador of the company wherever you are working. So, the way you want to be mindful of the things that of course, in some level that you post on social media to the extent that it impacts, the company, they could be watching that. You don't want to overshare any information that you learn about in the company. Maintain those confidences. Whatever you're doing and on whatever level, you may be exposed to certain information that there's an expectation it's kept confidential, right? Of course, depending on your role and everything, some more than others, in other words. But you want to make sure that you're not in a public setting necessarily talking about, what you just learned at the town hall meeting, because it may not be something that's for public dissemination. Or if you're doing, you're reviewing somebody's application for insurance, that you're not talking about it in the restaurant where other people can hear about that particular entity and their needs and why they need it. There's a certain level of good judgment that you have by kind of maintaining those confidences of even of your own coworkers, right? You don't want to be seen as one of the gossip. And then the last thing I'll say outside of all this, unless there's anybody has any thoughts that they want to add about, building character, is this slide right here. Take care of yourself. It really is. everybody has been through a tremendous amount the last 2 years, almost to the point where you probably don't even realize it, because it's, in some level, it's become the new norm, right? There's like this, it's, things have been stressful, certainly could be, things have been difficult. Many of you starting out now in your careers, or a different path in your career, you're doing it under exceptional circumstances, right? You're doing it in a just a world through nobody's fault necessarily, is different than it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And it's very easy to just to be overly stressed, to not take some time to focus on you. You need to have that. I mean, this is, I'm trying to take my own advice too, by the way, but it is important. Having that time for you, whether it's to go, meditate, whether it's to do some activity, whether it's to just go for a walk, or whether it's just to connect with, loved ones and friends socially that you haven't seen in a while. Take that time. It is important as well, because if you're happy in every other aspect of your life, it's going to translate, of course, to your workplace. If you don't, you have to have a nice balance. So please, focus on yourselves, take care of yourselves. If you're on record, it's not a good fit. How do you give your manager the benefit of knowing how you feel? So, okay, for the last question, if you continue to feel unrecognized, again, it's not a good fit. How do you give your manager? Well, that's a good question. This is going back to the question earlier about being recognized. How do you advocate for yourself? So the manager's not really giving you that attention. The manager's not really reaching out to you and kind of giving you props, or lifting you up and trying to kind of advocate in a way for you. So what do you do? And look, it's a fair point that it may not be a good fit, right? Maybe it's not. Maybe this person is doesn't have the same value structure you do. I think that, but there is always a way to, again, I think people appreciate honesty and communication. So you have to find the right time and the place to kind of talk about them. And maybe without making it sound judgmental, like, you're not doing this, be like, how can I put myself in a position that I want to make sure these achievements are recognized by you? Here's what I've done. I'd like to have a weekly or bi-weekly meeting with you so I can go over things that I want to work on professionally and that I want to develop, and also let you know what I've done and what I could be doing, and get feedback from you. And then you can likewise express to them, like, is there any other people I should be working with to further develop my skills, and so that they could see, the contributions, and so that I can add value to this company. Like, those are the things I don't think you want to pose it as, you're a lousy manager, you're not giving me enough, credit and attention, because all that's going to do is probably make that person feel defensive. And if they weren't out on their own trying to kind of lift you up and help you, you presenting it in that way, even if not those words, is not likely to be successful. So I think it does kind of start, I think perhaps one way of doing that is by suggesting solutions, meeting regularly with your own manager so that you can express to him or her what you've been working on, what you think you've accomplished this week, and what remains to be accomplished, and how you'd like to get to that path. And that perhaps one path that that could help you is working with different departments, different managers, because you could think that could round out your technical toolbox. That I need some help working on this, and I'd like to do that, and I'd like people to to see my accomplishments and what I can offer and how I can help the company. So thank you for that question. I don't know if anyone else has any questions, any points. I know we've gone by quick. Anything that we could talk about? Anything? I mean, I know it's so easy to just sit back and hear, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Nothing that I presented, like I said, it's not science, but it's also not written in stone. There are things that you all may have experiences of your own. You recognize what has worked for you and what hasn't worked for you. And, candidly, I could benefit from that, and so could everybody else on this call. So feel free to share it. And you can
I got a question, Mike.
Yeah.
I'm curious. So in the last section, the take care of yourself section, I feel like I do not do a good job of taking breaks in my day, especially working remotely and from home. And I know we were talking before everyone jumped on about, if you're in a city going for walks, you're saying, taking a walk around New York and enjoying the summer that way. But do you have any other tips and tricks for really trying to build in some of that self-care throughout your day-to-day?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think, look, a lot of it just starts within your mindset. Like it is important, and you have to kind of recognize it because you're not going to be your best if you're completely just strung, tightly wound, and every minute of your day is just busy, 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 and you have nothing to focus on yourself. That doesn't mean you go on a 4 hour lunch break or walk. You have to, it's working hours. You have to work. What I've done is I will block out and I just did it ahead of time, like on my calendar, like 12:30 to 1:30 or whatever the time period is, like an hour for to make sure I eat. Like I was finding earlier on when I was working, I wasn't even having lunch. Like I would work and I'd work until like 2:33 and I'm hungry. I'm like, all right, it's already, I don't know if I'm close to should wait for dinner or if I should just keep working. So I found that I needed a reminder, much like I was scheduling other appointments, that I needed to block out that time. And with our world today, the way we are, because again, we're not necessarily always in the same office space. So somebody's not going to just walk by and knock on my door and come in. People will just put things on your calendar, right? With technology, you could do that. If you're using Outlook, for example, somebody could look and see you're available during this time, and they'll schedule something during that period of time, that lunch, if you don't block it out. So I always recommend blocking out at least half an hour, whatever you're allotted, whatever you're allowed to. Whether it's, again, like I said, a half hour, an hour, maybe it's 2 half-hour periods where you just can kind of get away. Sometime at around lunchtime, and then somewhere a little later, so that you detach and you just kind of focus on you. And whether that's just listening to music, whether it's getting a workout in, whether it's going for a walk, whether it's talking to friends, you need to be your full self. You really do. And because you could sprint for a certain while, you can't sprint a marathon, right? So you have to pace yourself. And the only way you do that is by kind of being intentional about it and reserving some of that time. And people will respect it. Look, it doesn't mean that it's, again, written in stone. Like, no, I can't move my 12:30, break. Maybe I've moved it, and maybe you could too, right? Instead of it being 12:30, say, fine, I'll do it at 1. I'll take that, that important call that works for everybody else except for me. So I'll move my schedule around to accommodate that. But you do have to make sure that you reserve some of that time for you, and you do have a hobby or something that you're interested in, an activity, anything to do with it. That's, but I do believe it starts with you committing to it. That's as important as any other commitment that you're making professionally or personally. You won't make it. You won't be able to sprint the whole marathon, right? So thank you for that, Rachel. It's a good question. Anybody else? No. Oh, I don't know if this is here. Oh, thank you. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Every now and then I get a decent advice. But I don't know. Like I said, I know it's an awkward sometimes in a way environment to have these kind of discussions, remotely. And don't be shy. Feel free to look me up too if that's easier for you, either on LinkedIn or send me an email to my Argo email if you like. It's michael.tiliakos@argogroupus.com. So I have the longest email address, by the way. Like I get exhausted writing it because it's my full name. So it's my first name, Michael, dot my last name, Tiliakos, at Argo Group US, ARGO Group US.com. So, feel free to just reach out, separately. Practice some of those networkings, keep in touch. We'll see how well you do. I'm a safe, easy practice person. You can reach out to me, and connect with me and, get to know me and vice versa with little to no stress. I believe, by the way, so much in networking because on a personal level, it's enriched my life. Like I've met so many good people through that. And it hasn't always all been professional. Like it's been in some of that nonprofit work that I do where I meet people. And then sometimes there's positive business things too that come out of it. But on a personal level, it's been really enriching. The more people you meet, the better, right? But on a professional level, like I told you before, it's really helped me in my life. It is a valuable currency. And the more, if this is your first job that you're launching into, that's wonderful, right? I can guarantee you at some point in your career, as you move along, your next opportunity, whether that's within your existing company or in another company, it's going to come from your network, right? And it may not be your direct network. It may be your network's network. So I know Rachel, Rachel knows somebody else, and she introduces me to that person, and my opportunity comes from there, whatever that may be. So be open to that and share it. Don't be, and I know that can be a little, people can be hesitant about that. But sometimes some of the best networking is when you don't get a direct immediate benefit from it. You're helping put two other people together, and you helped out, and it comes back to you because they both, have some kind of direct benefit from that relationship and that introduction. And who do you think they're going to thank for that? You. And they're going to come back, and you never know where that's going to lead to. So listen, do good for the sake of doing good, but there is oftentimes a positive thing that comes out of it, a positive result, and that is, again, it comes back to you in some positive karma.
Awesome. Mike, thank you so much. This has been, you've provided some really great advice. I think both really broad and also very tangible tips and tricks. I feel like I've gotten a couple of really fantastic things from my back pocket. So thank you. I think to your point at the beginning, sort of about it being all of this sort of being common sense, but common sense is not common, and hearing it, the more we hear it, just the easier it is to sort of actually implement in our day-to-day. So I really appreciate you sharing this with us today. And thank you again to everybody on the call for joining. We really appreciate you being here with us today. I hope you'll join us again next week as well. We have a session actually on Wednesday, so we're sort of diverging from our Thursday schedule. It'll be next Wednesday, the 20th at 1:30 Eastern time. That's going to be a workers' compensation 101 session. So if you're interested in workers' comp, Katie Janik, who's the training specialist with AF Group, will be joining us and sharing sort of the foundations of what workers' comp is. And so we hope you'll join us for that if you're interested. Mike, thank you so much again to you and to Brianna, who's on the call, for her amazing work in coordinating, and to Argo Group more generally for your support. We're so grateful.
Thank you. Our pleasure. Good luck to everybody. Please keep in touch. And it has been a pleasure having a chance to talk and somewhat meet all of you.